On this Monday night, offline, a social media giant crashes. The ripple effects of the Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp outage. The day after, a whistleblower tells all.
Facebook over and over again has shown it chooses profit over safety.
Can the world function without Facebook? Sisters in Spirit honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
We're letting the families know that they're not alone.
The race to contain an oil spill off California, the company's prior violations. And at age 90, he's actually making the trek.
I'm alone.
William Shatner's upcoming flight to the edge of space.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The world got a big reminder today about how reliant we are on social media companies. Facebook and its other platforms, including Instagram and WhatsApp, were out of service for about 6 hours today, affecting potentially billions of users. Facebook's internal systems used by employees also went down. They're coming back online now. The company has not said what caused it. Last night, the CBS News program 60 Minutes aired an interview with a whistleblower who says Facebook puts profits ahead of safety.
Facebook has realized that if they change the algorithm to be safer, people will spend less time on the site, they'll click on less ads, they'll make less money.
Frances Hogan worked on Facebook's civic integrity team for 2 years before she left in May. She's set to testify before Congress tomorrow about Facebook's impact, especially on young users. The impact of this outage is hard to overstate. It affected governments, businesses, and individuals around the world. Mike Armstrong has our top story tonight.
Whatever happened just before noon Eastern. Facebook and what it calls its family of apps went down. In their place, an error message, the sort of thing you see when you're not connected to the internet. Except it appears it's Facebook itself and its apps, things like Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger, that are the ones not connected.
Total outage, no signs of life for Facebook, any Facebook services globally. This is huge.
Facebook had to take to Twitter to explain, tweeting that it was working to get things back to normal as quickly as possible. The issue appears to be a problem with the company's information on the internet's domain name system, DNS. Users logging on can't reach the site because its DNS information isn't there. It's like losing access to a phone number. The likely cause, experts say, an error in a new security configuration.
All the information that's out there appears that Facebook was making some sort of change, and that in the process of making that change, they accidentally disabled this and locked themselves out.
There are reports one of the reasons the outage dragged on so long is because so many Facebook employees are working from home. When they got locked out, they couldn't fix the problem. In fact, there are reports employees then had difficulties even getting into the company's offices physically.
It's alleged that when they got there, none of them could get into the building because their badges and ID system is all tied into that same network that's not working.
Now, there is still a chance a hacker went after the company. That was a possibility a lot of people jumped to when it went down. Facebook has been swirling in criticism in recent weeks and took a big hit Sunday night on 60 Minutes. The program interviewed a whistleblower who says Facebook is tearing societies apart by putting profits ahead of the public good.
When we live in an information environment that is full of angry, hateful, polarizing content, it erodes our civic trust. It erodes our faith in each other.
That whistleblower is set to testify to U.S. lawmakers Tuesday, but experts say that the outage came the very next day after her revelations is likely just a coincidence. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
Facebook stock took a big hit today, recording its worst day of the year on the markets. It closed at just over $326 a share. That's down nearly 5%. In Alberta, help is on its way to assist overwhelmed healthcare workers. Medical staff from the military, the Canadian Red Cross, and from Newfoundland and Labrador are expected to arrive this week to help in hospitals across the province. There are 298 people in Alberta's ICUs now, the vast majority critically ill with COVID-19. ICU capacity is at 80%, but that includes the extra beds added. If there was no surge capacity, Alberta ICUs would be at 172% capacity. Those patients, of course, are not just numbers. Even after all the world has endured from COVID, many never expected the virus would make them so sick. Heather Yourex-West reports.
This is my first day in the hospital with COVID.
It has been almost a month since Jilleen Oar made this video. The 24-year-old is from Slave Lake in northern Alberta, and for the last 24 days, she's been on a ventilator in an Edmonton ICU.
It's hard to see my sister like this because I'm so used to her talking to me and laughing with me, and now it's just I hear the ventilator just going and going and going. That's all I hear.
Shakira says both she and her big sister were hesitant about the COVID vaccine at first, but they eventually decided it was the right thing to do. Shakira was vaccinated in early August. Jilleen had an appointment near the end of the month. She got sick just 2 days before.
She has or had a blood clot in her lung, so it's severe damage in her right now, and the doctor said that it would most likely take a miracle for her to recover.
ICUs across Alberta are now filled with patients like Jilleen. With lower vaccine coverage, areas of central and northern Alberta have been particularly hard hit.
Our ICU has been just overwhelmed for weeks now, right? Running way beyond maximum capacity. And there's a lot of challenges that go along with that.
It's why last month the province asked Ottawa for help. In addition to a small team of critical care nurses from the Canadian Armed Forces, medical staff from the Canadian Red Cross and the province of Newfoundland are expected to arrive later this week.
I think the help, if it can alleviate or give some reprieve to some of our frontline teams, I think people would are grateful for that. I worry it won't be enough.
Doctors' groups have been calling on the province to implement more health restrictions, including a lockdown to bring COVID infection numbers down. Scheduled surgeries have now been cancelled across the province for several weeks. Already, there are thousands of surgeries to catch up on. Shakira Oar just hopes her sister will survive.
A lot of people love her, and I know that a lot of people are praying for her.
Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
More and more provinces are requiring proof of vaccination to enter public places. That will help reduce the number of people who get infected, but the Delta variant is still surging in some parts of this country. And as Eric Sorensen reports, holidays such as Thanksgiving could increase it again.
Nova Scotia is the latest province to require proof of full vaccination to access non-essential locations like gyms, theaters, and restaurants.
We were super busy. We had a line up out the door, and all of our guests all had their ID and their COVID proof.
At this gym, they hope proof of vaccination will keep COVID cases down and keep their doors open.
Whatever's going to keep us safe during this time and gives us a gradual transition back to some sense of normalcy is something that we're looking forward to.
All provinces now have or will soon have a type of vaccine passport. While 2/3 of Canadians got their first doses last spring, government mandates may have spurred a recent uptake. In July, 1.2 million Canadians got their first dose. The number dropped to below 1 million in August. But as vaccine requirements increased, more than 1.3 million got their first doses in September.
Requirements have been put into place by lots of different jurisdictions, employers, and so forth. That directly influences kind of where we're seeing things in terms of uptake.
New Brunswick is now fighting its biggest surge in COVID cases, highlighting regional differences. British Columbia has just made masks mandatory in schools for all children, even as young as kindergarten. While the national picture suggests the fourth wave is leveling off, it depends on your province. The three westernmost provinces, BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, have all seen sharp recent spikes in COVID cases, while the two biggest provinces, Ontario and Quebec, have kept the fourth wave relatively in check. In Atlantic Canada, a big surge in New Brunswick, where cases have spiked to more than double the highest rate that province has seen in the pandemic. The Delta variant is proving to be more opportunistic, finding clusters of people who are not fully vaccinated.
We certainly know that it's far more contagious than the Alpha variant was, which was, again, what drove our third wave.
Being more contagious could make Thanksgiving a risk, even with widespread vaccinations, because children are still not vaccinated.
The best way to keep children safe is to ensure that the adults around them are vaccinated. And we need to be really careful about that to ensure that, we're not doing things that will later result in increased outbreaks in school settings. vaccinated.
Advice for this Thanksgiving? Smaller gatherings are better than larger ones, and keep the windows open for better ventilation. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Health Canada is now reviewing an experimental antiviral drug that could cut hospitalizations and deaths from COVID-19 by as much as half. It is not approved yet, and it needs more review. Jamie Mauracher explains what we know and don't know about the antiviral pill.
Unvaccinated patients continue to fill up Canadian hospitals, leaving doctors and nurses at their breaking point.
We're just as COVID exhausted as everybody else, and things need to change.
For a system under stress, experts are hopeful this little pill, molnupiravir, could offer some alleviation. Currently, all Health Canada approved COVID treatments require a medical professional to be administered. Similar to Tamiflu, molnupiravir would be taken at home orally to help dampen the effects of the illness.
Oral therapy is always going to be easier to give, but I think the important component is that this is not a cure for COVID.
In clinical trials, drug maker Merck says the twice-a-day antiviral reduced hospitalizations and deaths in COVID patients by 50%. Matthias Gutter and his team at the University of Alberta tested the efficacy of the drug before Merck's results were even released.
The drug doesn't really inhibit the virus, but it causes the virus to make too many mistakes,
forcing it to make a sloppy copy that is no longer infectious. Goti says it's important to get the drug to patients soon after diagnosis.
Molnupiravir can be taken much earlier before the virus has caused already so much damage that antivirals don't work anymore.
As early as 5 days after infection, according to Merck's trials.
It provides another way that we can effectively treat people and reduce the risk of hospitalization and death, which is incredibly important, obviously. But it doesn't mean that those who haven't been vaccinated should sit back now and say, I don't need to worry.
With no shortage of shots in Canada, that, experts say, remains the first and best line of defense. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
Vigils across the country today are honoring the lives of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. It is known as Sisters in Spirit Day. As Raquel Fletcher reports, many Indigenous women say they do feel more supported now and are taking back their power. And a warning, some of the details in her story are disturbing.
Red dresses blowing in the wind at this vigil in Chelsea, Quebec are a sad reminder of Canada's missing and murdered Indigenous women. Vigils around the country Monday are honoring these women's lives.
We're letting the families know that they're not alone.
In Alberta, Natawawaki English organized a march in honor of her daughters, one of them brutally murdered in 2015.
Joey's body was dismembered and was spread around Calgary, Alberta, Crescent Heights parks, and the landfills. To this day, Joey's limbs still sit in the landfills, and only her torso and head came home.
For the last 4 years, English has walked this nearly 200-kilometer stretch of highway from her First Nation to this vigil in Calgary.
Every year it grows exponentially.
Fighting for their cause since 2005, the Indigenous women behind Sisters in Spirit hope public interest in reconciliation and observation of last week's Truth and Reconciliation holiday will mean more visibility and more support for the calls to action from the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett is saying in a statement, "We offer support to the families and communities who bear the grief of their loss and to the survivors whose lives have been forever changed."
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was notably absent last Thursday, caught vacationing in Tofino instead of participating in any of the Truth and Reconciliation Day events. He won't be attending any of the vigils Monday either. His office is saying that he will instead light a candle in his window as recommended by the Native Women's Association of Canada.
Whether he shows up to these or not, we have the support of Canada. We have support of other Canadians that are allies to us.
We're the daring ones to take that step ahead and do something about it. Women. The women power.
Raquel Fletcher, Global News, Ottawa.
The consequences of an oil spill off California coming up, the cleanup underway, and the company's track record. Work is underway to contain and mop up a huge oil spill off the coast of Southern California. More than 480,000 liters of heavy crude leaked from an underwater pipeline owned by Amplify Energy. The slick spans about 33 square kilometers between Huntington Beach and Newport Beach. It's one of the largest spills in California's history. Local officials call it an environmental catastrophe and say the oil has reached sensitive wetlands.
We do have sightings of additional oiled gulls and other shorebirds that are flighted, so very difficult to catch, but we're pursuing other alternative capture strategies, such as using mist nets and other techniques to be able to catch those animals very quickly.
The company says the pipeline has been shut down. Investigators are narrowing in on the source of the leak and are considering a ship's anchor as a possible cause. Amplify Energy emerged from bankruptcy 4 years ago and has a long record of federal non-compliance incidents and violations. The Pandora Papers ahead, the documents exposing how the uber-rich hide their wealth. There is a widely held view that the ultra-rich are rigging the system. Well, the latest leaked documents called the Pandora Papers expose how many rich people use offshore accounts and complex webs of financial engineering. Much of it is legal, some of it is not. The end result is the same. Many of the richest people in the world avoid paying tax. And on the list are kings, presidents, and sports stars, plus more than 500 Canadians. Anne Gaviola reports.
From pop star Shakira to Russian President Vladimir Putin, the King of Jordan, and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, the Pandora Papers shed light on how the rich and famous have used offshore accounts over the last quarter century, providing privacy and tax avoidance tools so hidden trillions in assets can be tucked away, often for shady purposes. The Pandora Papers probed nearly 12 million files, including emails and bank statements. 330 current and former politicians are mentioned. The exposé, the work of 600 journalists from 117 countries.
To be clear, it's not illegal to have an offshore bank account or to set up a company in another country, as long as it's disclosed and the appropriate taxes are paid. The problem with tax havens, though, is that they're a go-to for money launderers, criminals, and tax evaders.
So our tax system makes it just a bit too easy to pay very little tax when you're holding assets abroad and investing abroad.
More than 500 Canadian citizens or residents are mentioned in the papers. Many aren't household names, but some are high profile, like Olympic figure skater Elvis Stojko, who moved $6.5 million in assets to an offshore trust in 2007, or Formula One champion Jacques Villeneuve, who has lived in Quebec, shown to have set up companies in zero tax jurisdictions for his racing and endorsement incomes. In a statement to Global News, the Canada Revenue Agency reiterates its commitment to protecting the integrity of the Canadian tax system by combating international tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance domestically and internationally. The Liberal platform pledged to increase CRA resources by up to $1 billion annually, but the opposition says there hasn't been a single conviction for tax evasion in the 6 years that Trudeau has been in office.
We've had historically low enforcement over money laundering and white-collar crime in Canada.
Tax experts say that since a similar investigation, the Panama Papers, were released 5 years ago, some rules globally and in Canada have changed to catch tax avoiders. But with the right lawyers and accountants, companies and individuals are still able to play hide-and-seek with their wealth. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next, look who's heading to the final frontier. What do a chili pepper and a hug have in common? A Nobel Prize. 2 American scientists share this year's Nobel Prize for physiology or medicine for their work on sensing touch and temperature. David Julius and Ardem Patapoutian discovered how our bodies convert physical sensations into electrical messages in the nervous system, such as the burning we feel when we eat a chili pepper or the comforting warmth of a hug from a loved one. Heat, cold, and touch are crucial to our own survival, and how our bodies do it has been a mystery. The findings could lead to new ways of treating pain. Canadian actor William Shatner is going to the edge of space for real. At age 90, Shatner, who's best known as Captain James T. Kirk, is getting a seat on the Blue Origin rocket, the space travel company billionaire Jeff Bezos created. Shatner is more famous than many actual astronauts for his voyages on the Starship Enterprise. And next week, fiction meets reality. Mike Drolet explains.
Mr. Spock, it's him. It's the captain.
William Shatner used to hate all the attention that came with being Captain Kirk. It took him decades of cheesy sets and overacting before he finally accepted the impact he made on space exploration today.
One of the most visited artifacts at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, which has, Apollo 11 and John Glenn space capsule and all that, is the model of the Enterprise that they used during the Star Trek series.
So Shatner became synonymous with space without ever having gone. Well, next week, that's going to change. On Twitter, he announced, "It's true, I'm going to be a rocket man."
Command engine start. 2, 1.
And not only that, at 90 years old, he'll become the oldest person to go to space in history, taking the title from 82-year-old Wally Funk, who flew on Blue Origin's New Shepard spacecraft in July.
Already standing by.
It took over 50 years for Kirk to go where no actor has gone before. But alas, he won't be the first actor, because the Russians beat him to it. In a move that harkens back to the space race of the 1950s and 60s, Russia is now sending up a film crew tomorrow to shoot the first movie in space. Even so, they won't get anywhere near the attention because of William James T. Kirk Shatner, soon to be Rocket Man.
Rocket Man, burning out his fuse out here alone.
Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Here Canada is the Big Muddy Badlands in southern Saskatchewan. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.